Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2B DM gang, I have somebody on the show who I actually had on my other podcast, the Fast Leader Show, and we had such a great discussion about marketing and digital marketing that I had to ask him to come on this show. And Patrick Schwerdtfeger is actually the author of Anarchy Inc. and Pandemic Inc. And both of these books address some of the overall just chaos that is going on, that is going to continue to happen throughout our world. And that's one reason why it's so important to really tap into the mind of a person like Patrick and learn about his background and experience in B2B digital marketing and just the overall marketing and impact. So Patrick, if you could tell us a little bit about your experience with B2B digital marketing and the passions that you have for it.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, it's great to be back. So thank you so much for the invite. My experience with paid digital ads came because I was promoting myself. But I learned a lot, along the way, and paid advertising has completely changed my career. So I'm a huge fan of it. So along the way, I kind of became a student of some of the different techniques that people were using. And now, I study technology trends. That's what I do. So I'm always looking at trends. And of course, data, data is the new oil. I mean, we've all heard these axioms now a million times, but the reality is that data is playing a bigger and bigger role. And the whole, follow the customer journey, the user experience, all these other keyword phrases, which are popular as well, are all being driven by data. So it's turned into a game where some people are leveraging data. Most are not. I mean, it's incredible. I would say the vast majority of the economy is not effectively using data in their advertising, but some are, and they have a huge advantage going forward. So I'm trying to learn from their experience and incorporate some of those strategies into my own business.
Well, but I think you and I, and this is one of the things that I have to be careful about with you, my friend, is that you and I have such great discussion that we don't get recorded, that for me, I'm trying to pull it back in, right? So you and I talked about SEO, we talked about paid ads, and you said something that was extremely profound in regards to maybe the maturity of an organization, as well as the size and spend capabilities of an organization. So if you could please share, really the impact of, paid ads and SEO and how that plays out.
Well, we talked about a lot of things before we clicked record today, so I'm not even exactly sure what you're...
Well, you said something when an organization is small and growing, the whole...
Oh, sure. Okay, got it. No, perfect. Thank you. What I was saying before is, so, when you start out in business, if you're self-employed or if you're just, starting out as an individual to get started, at the beginning, you've got no money, but you have time. And so you can use time. There's a lot of things you can, so in other words, what's the best use? What's the best strategy? Well, it depends on what stage of your business you're in. If you're just getting started, you have no money, there's no point trying to blow what little money you have on paid ads, because you can get a lot more bang for your buck just doing things that are free, like SEO and optimizing your website. And you can optimize your position on the different social media platforms, like Instagram and so on. There's all kinds of things you can do to, even on Amazon, there's incredible things you can do to position your book or your other product for free. It doesn't cost anything, but you're playing with the keywords. But then later on, that's when you have money, but you no longer have time, because now your business has evolved. You got a lot of stuff going on. And so at that point, doing the free stuff is kind of a waste of time, because you can buy your way in. You can spend money and get there a lot faster and still have your time available to do all the other things that are required to keep the business going. So the best marketing strategy or advertising strategy really depends on whether it's kind of those two groups. If you're at early stage, just getting started where you have time, that's one thing. But once you get past that, then it's an entirely different ballgame.
Well, even when you say that, I start thinking of, a lot of, tech startups, and a tech startup can last for a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
That's for sure. And so, they have, some of those constraints, and they may not have some of the money because they're in between rounds or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But you also may even have a part of an organization that's maybe more mature. Maybe they have some cash in other parts of the business, and it hasn't been allocated to you. So you still have to focus in that, while I may have a big brand behind me, I don't have, the budget behind me. And so I think we often find ourselves doing something that you said was critically important, and I wrote it down, is that you iterate, you navigate, and you pivot. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this is, I have a lot of opinions that might be unique to me, but I think, for example, business plans are largely just a complete waste of time, because you're mapping out step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But the truth is, you have no idea what step 2 is going to really be until you finish step 1, because your perception of the marketplace changes every time you do something. So there's an axiom I live by, which is the road to being is through doing. You have to do anything, even small things. Just take action in the direction of your goals, because if you take that first step, now you've got new insights, right? And so step 2 reveals itself to you. Step 2 becomes obvious once you're finished step 1. And once you finish step 2, step 3 becomes obvious. So you kind of have to, it's an organic thing. You just have to go in the direction of your goals. And then, exactly what you said, iterate, pivot, over and over and over again. And I see this happen in my own life, my own business. I mean, I do think there's value in kind of taking a long view and maybe putting a tree on the horizon and saying, okay, I want to go towards that tree. But aside from that, you got to look down and look at your feet and the ground right in front of you and just start taking steps. It's literally, if you're taking a hike, you take 3 steps and there's a big tree or a rock, you got to go around it. The same thing happens in business, right? You take steps and all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, that didn't work the way I expected it to work. And so now I got to change and I got to pivot. But just recently, so my recent book, Pandemic Inc., it literally went live on Amazon today. So I'm right in the middle of this. But I've tried to learn about, essentially SEO, right? Search engine optimization, but not search engine, it's Amazon optimization. And how do you optimize your listing on Amazon? And I bought a little software for it, and I paid a membership to like a program that was teaching me about it. And I also went to YouTube and just searched for videos on how to optimize products on Amazon. I couldn't believe that there was a video I watched, Jim, and it was a guy who was putting a yoga mat. Imagine how many yoga mats are on Amazon. I mean, there's probably thousands, right? And he was putting it on Amazon, and he did all this keyword research and picked out, which keywords had the largest potential but the least competition. And this information is all available. And he did it. He did the whole thing. And by the end of the video, I think it was a 7-minute video, he showed the end result and how this yoga mat was now ranking organically. It wasn't paid. There was no pay. And so even, I'm going to go back and make a caveat to what I said earlier, because even when you're right, even when you do have money and maybe you don't have any time, it probably makes sense to hire somebody, you don't have to pay a lot of money, who knows what they're doing to do that optimization on your behalf. So maybe you're too busy to do it yourself, but there are such amazing, my own business has literally been driven by SEO, which took an enormous amount of time years ago. But like 8 years ago, 2012, I started trying to optimize my website. And those listings that I created back then, those pages, those landing pages, continue to bring me business today in 2020. That's 8 years later. I never would have imagined that they'd be active and effective for that long.
And when you're saying that, I start thinking about a lot of the things that we do have come out that says, oh, hey, you need to do this now. Hey, you need to do this now. Hey, you need to do this now. Or heck, all these things have changed and now you need to do that. And so there's a lot of hype that just happens, right? So when I start thinking about B2B digital marketing, what do you think is just like really loaded with hype?
Well, I guess if I had to say anything, we can go back to what I said before, that if you have no money and you have time, then paid advertising is overblown. But meanwhile, if you got a lot of money but no time, then maybe the SEO stuff is a little bit overblown. But I'll throw one more in the mix, which might be controversial, but it's it's a landscape that's changed dramatically, literally within the last month, and that's the influencer market, and in particular, micro influencers. If you have the large influencers, there's some opportunity there, but you got to play by their terms, and you never know what's going to come out of their mouth, and it's a very tricky thing. And now, Joe Rogan just got $100 million to move his stuff to Spotify. That completely changed the landscape for influencers, and now influencers are going to be charging a lot more money because they think they have more value to bring. Some of them do. But, like, for example, on Instagram, I have like maybe 700 or 800 followers on Instagram. Nothing, a very small audience. And I get these emails like inviting me to represent some product and try and help sell that product. I think that kind of micro influencer campaign, for the most part, is not going to deliver much. I might be wrong because I haven't tested it, but my perception looking in from the outside is that it's probably overblown. I might add, by the way, that there is a new trend, and I can't think of the names, but there are virtual influencers now. There's a number of them that have done quite well, like like having millions of followers. There's a model, a beautiful black model, very dark skin model, a woman, I forget her name. And there's another one that's out of Asia, I think out of Japan, that's done extremely well. But we're going to see in the years to come, we're going to see a proliferation of virtual influencers, and you're going to have an entire team running these influencers, including like a comedic writer, like a humor writer, to have personality. It's all about character development. They have to be funny and clever and entertaining, but you can completely map out. So you don't have the risk of having Elon Musk smoke a joint on Joe Rogan's podcast, and now you got a huge problem on your hands. Like, you don't have that with virtual influencers. So we're seeing that market pivot as well.
That's a very good point. Okay, so now the book that you talked about that was just released is called Pandemic Inc. And just like many of your other things, there's always an acronym that kind of drives it. And so you talk about SALVAGED. What is SALVAGED?
This whole thing started, I had a client ask me to do a webinar discussing the pandemic and the quarantine and how businesses could survive. So I started doing the research, and I kind of ended up with 9 trends. And these trends existed before, okay? But that they're accelerating as a result of this. So it's not like this is anything new. In fact, a lot of the trends I even discussed in my previous book called Anarchy Inc. So there's some overlap in that content. But the point is that they're accelerating as a result of the pandemic. And so I took the first letter of each trend and put it into one of those Scrabble cheat engines that you get online, and just to see what it came up with. And it came up, 8 of the letters fit into the word salvaged. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. So I combined 2 into 1, and that's the acronym. So the S is, these are, I'll just run through them. But again, these are trends that existed before, but they're accelerating. So the first one is self-sufficiency. These are the off-the-grid survival people. There's more of them today than there were before. Number 2, analytics. That's the A. Data analytics is everything, and certainly here in advertising, what we're talking about today. The L, liquidity. Priority number 1 right now is liquidity, just survival. What's your cash position? For example, we're going to see an increase in cash balances on company balance sheets, for example. What's the next one? V is virtualization, which is obvious. Even just these Zoom calls is a good example of that. The second A is automation, so robotics and automation. The G is government. And whether you like government or hate government, I'm fine either way, but they're spending money. They got budgets and they're spending money. So if you can sell something to support a government program, that could be a growth opportunity. The E is exponential thinking. We're living it. For the first time, the population truly understands exponential progressions, and that's becoming more important. And then the last one is D for decentralization, which is kind of like the big trend that encompasses all the others, because we're really going towards a more and more decentralized, in so many ways. Open source is probably the best example, but we're really going from centralized structures to more decentralized structures. The media is a great example. Like, you've got these channels. We used to have a dozen primary media outlets. Today, there's literally millions of blogs and podcasts and so on. So that's again centralized to decentralized. It's happening in the power industry. We used to have these centralized power plants. Now we've got solar panels on millions of roofs around the entire world. That's a decentralized power generation mechanism. So we see this all over the place.
Well, and when you're talking, I start thinking about that and pulling it back in the whole, B2B digital marketing world, and to say that how can I take advantage of Salvaged and all those elements and really become a disruptor myself?
Well, I love the paid advertising. Okay, and the paid advertising is. So let me give an example. And I like clothing. I like nice jackets and boots and things like that. That's something that I like. And of course the data shows that. So whoever's selling marketing, like on Instagram, for example, I see these photographs on Instagram, these incredible leather jackets, and I just immediately love them. And I click on it. So that's the original, the first engagement. And then you end up in this kind of labyrinth. And this is where the data really comes into play. And this, if you want to talk about B2B advertising, I mean, here it is right here. So you have an initial campaign, which is just designed to figure out who is interested in this space. You're not trying to make a sale. You're not trying to make a sale on that first engagement. You're trying to get that person to a landing page, and then they either engage with it or they don't. So the original group splits into two. Okay. So now you've got two advertising campaigns, one that targets the group that engaged, and another campaign that targets the people that didn't engage. Okay. And so then you have different offers. So the one goes to two. And then in each case, those people either engage or they don't. So that splits into 4. Okay. And then 8 and 16 and 32. And the people, we've got all these niche fashion designers now that are thriving and doing well because they're leveraging this type of exclusion-based marketing. So you got your original campaign, you get them to a landing page, and group A engaged and group B didn't. So you exclude B and you do a new campaign to A, and then you do another one to B and you exclude A. So it's an exclusion. Okay, so you've segmented the marketing from 1 to 2, and then you segment further and further and further. So I have a friend of mine who actually called me today. I have to return his call, and he is the voice, like the host of a quite successful video program. You pay for it. It's not free. You pay for it, but it's a video program about medicinal marijuana. And that's not really a field that I'm passionate about, but he is. And it's very doctors, and it's very medicine oriented. It's not at all like, the more, different types of genres within that space. But the bottom line is he goes into the studio here in Los Angeles from time to time, and he records dozens and dozens of little short video clips designed for these little segments, right? And so you end up, from one campaign, you can end up with 60 or 70, different paths. So when people say follow the customer journey, when people say user experience, this is what they're talking about, right? The people who engage with that advertising, they feel like they're being held by the hand and walked through. And at every stage, they're getting a message which is specifically tailored to what they've done so far. And the more intuitive you can make that process, the more trust you're going to build. And trust is an essential precursor to the purchase, so to the sale. So if you want to sell stuff, you got to use these exclusion-based marketing opportunities. And the one last thing I'll throw in there before you'll respond, obviously, but is the Omni-channel opportunity, where the first advertising can take place on YouTube, okay, for example. And then you can send them to a landing page, and now you've got a pixel, you got a Facebook pixel on that landing page, so now you can target the same person on Facebook. And of course, they own Instagram, so you can tag them there as well. And then you can do remarketing on the Google Display Network, so they see something on CNN.com or weather.com or something. And it creates this impression that you're huge, you're a big player, even though it could be a small team, right? Like, I do this myself. I'm a speaker. I earn my living by speaking at conferences. If people go to my website, it puts a cookie on their machine. I follow them around for 30 days, and they see my ad on different websites. And so they're like, man. And I'll tell you where this happened, by the way, because my 4th book, I wanted to get a cover quote from Brian Tracy, the speaker. And so I went to his website and I contacted him. He never even returned my email. That's fine. But for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, I started seeing ads for him all over the place on all these different websites. And I was like, you son of a gun, look what you're doing. You're remarketing me. He looked like a rock star, and now he kind of is a rock star. I'm not, right? I'm a small player. But now I'm doing the same thing. And people who interact with my website, they see my ads come up all over the place for the next 30 days. And by the time they actually connect with me, they're like, wow, you're a big deal. That's the opportunity. You can be big when you're small. That's the opportunity. And digital advertising just paves the way.
All right. So when I start thinking about, all of what you're talking about, and even going back to the whole salvage piece and the way things are accelerating at an ever increasing pace, the pivot, the iterate, all of these elements, I start looking at what I currently have in front of me and what I have to work with.
Yeah.
Budget. So if I am in a B2B digital marketing role and I have to work within the same budget, what would I take away from and put into?
I would just say that the beauty of the online world is you can throw $500 at something or $1,000 at something and get pretty good data of whether or not it's going to. And by the way, I never even fully answered your previous question. It's the first A in Salvaged, analytics, right? Analytics is the opportunity. As far as B2B advertising goes, leveraging data is the opportunity, and you can present yourself to be huge. But yeah, if you've got a limited budget, like I'm doing this right now on Amazon, and so I've thrown a campaign. I think I've spent $600, and I already know that certain things are working. Like I've got one category where I've made 5 sales in that category, and it's the most sales I've had in any one category. But they're expensive sales. I've got a whole bunch of other categories where I'm not making as many, but they're cheaper. And so like right now on Amazon, I'm targeting like over 50,000 keyword phrases. It's just an enormous amount of keyword phrases. And so immediately $600, like that's what I've spent so far. And I've already, like I targeted, for example, Tim Ferriss, okay, or Daniel Pink, or some of these well-known authors, Malcolm Gladwell. Like you can target the keyword phrase Malcolm Gladwell or Tim Ferriss or the titles of their books, for example. And they've all written many books, so you can get a lot of keyword phrases very, very quickly. Well, it turns out that everyone's targeting Tim Ferriss's books. So the clicks are like $3, it's $3 a click. Just so you're never going to make money selling a book. I've only got, $4 or $5 profit in a book, period. So, but meanwhile, I can target 50,000 other keyword phrases, which are quirky, weird keyword phrases that hardly ever get hit. But when they do, no one else is targeting them, and I can get those clicks for 20, 25 cents. So it's, I can get the same traffic. So the beauty of this is, by the way, that if other people are trying to like reverse engineer what I'm doing or replicate what I'm doing, it's highly unlikely that they're even going to know what I'm doing, because the keyword phrases I'm targeting are really like long tail keyword phrases. So my advice is test, like just put $500 towards something, $1,000 towards something, and then analyze the data like crazy and figure out what's the most, and then your step 2 becomes obvious. So it's not that you take away from Facebook and give it to YouTube. I don't have that answer, because I think they each target different audiences. But there's value, again, in taking small steps and iterating, small steps, iterating, small steps, iterating.
Well, then that leads me to ask the question, because, you, a big guy thinker, I'm like, okay, no constraints on you, Patrick. I give you all the money that you need. Where are you going to invest it as a B2B digital marketer?
Yeah, this is a great question, actually. So do you know, by any chance, Joel Osteen?
Yes.
He's a preacher. He's based in Texas. So that guy is on TV for a half hour every Sunday with no commercials. Do you know what that costs? That's expensive. I don't know what it costs, but who pays for it? Joel Osteen pays for that, okay? He pays for that. So, and then he knows, or by experience, he knows that he's going to get enough in donations to pay for that and have some left over, which goes to his ministry, right? And Tony Robbins was on TV in the 90s, right? Who paid for that? Tony Robbins did. Susie Orman, she did PBS specials. Cost about $120,000 to do a PBS special. Susie Orman's done that a couple of times. Wayne Dyer did that too. So in my business, there's a guy who I follow who's a competitor of mine. His name is Jeremy Gucci. He's from Canada. He's a great guy. He does an outstanding job as a speaker and as a futurist. But he has a video on YouTube, which is well optimized. And I also have well optimized videos on YouTube. And it's called like Innovation Keynote Speaker or something like that. And I've done that too. I've got a lot of videos. I've got 700 videos on YouTube. So I know roughly what kind of viewership you're going to get just from an organic listing. Okay. And he might get 10, 20, 30,000 views, maybe 40,000 views of a video like that. Meanwhile, he has like 6 or 7 million views, okay, on that. He bought those views. And I know he did because I've seen the ads myself. So I do ads on YouTube, and for any kind of targeting here in the United States, you're going to pay about 7, 8, 9 cents per view, roughly, right? So you do the math. If he's got 7 million views at 8 cents a piece, he spent $560,000 promoting the heck out of that video. So here's the answer to the question, right? You need to have a business model which is good enough to pay for what you spent, right? If you're just throwing money away, there's no point in doing that, okay? But like, for example, what's that guy's name? Grant Cardone, the 10X rule, right? He has his book on the very front table in the Hudson bookstores of the airport. That costs $70,000 a month to have your book there, right? Good to Great, Jim Collins, his book was there too. Why? Because both of them have big back ends that can pay for it, right? So you have to find a business model where your conversion rate is enough to pay for the advertising you're doing, and then scale up as far and as fast as you possibly can. So a lot of people fantasize about how much money they want to make. I fantasize about how much money I want to spend. Like, I would love to spend $100,000 a month profitably. I would love to do that, right? Now, and what would I pick? Well, you just got to test until you find one where you can scale up higher. So, and that's what I'm trying to do on Amazon right now. I know a guy who's spending thousands, like 5,000 to 10,000 a month on Amazon, and it's not profitable, but it's break even. It's roughly break even. And his book is selling like crazy. It's a book about gambling and horse racing. And he's absolutely doing spectacularly well. And it's break even. So he's going to scale up as far as he can until there's no more clicks left to buy. So that's what I fantasize about, is to have an advertising campaign that I could just scale and scale and scale. And if I had to pick one, just to answer your question, I would pick display ads. Display ads on other websites, because you get implied credibility. If you're running display ads on CNN.com or whatever, Fox News or whatever it is, people, it creates a certain effect. I've heard this so many times in my career that people think it's a big deal. Little do they know that you can pay to be there. But to be running display ads at scale, I think that's a huge opportunity. That's what I do.
Okay, so in order to kind of bring this all back home, because we talked about a lot of different things, I have to say, okay, it's self-reflection time. Talking about it for a B2B digital marketer. What is one vitally important question they need to be asking themselves?
Conversion rate. It's your conversion. Like, where is the conversion the best? That's going to... I know it's just, what I'm telling you is not a question that's a destination. It's a question that's the beginning of a journey, right? Because and that's always the way it is. Like, I don't think it's responsible for someone to say, hey, this is the answer to the problem, because it's going to be literally different for every single product or service you try to sell. But if you always just look at that conversion rate, like, what's the conversion rate? And if you're doing it at a loss, like you talk about the lifetime value of a customer, that's another question that really, because if you have a long, so what you need is a series of products. Like, you got the front product that you're selling, which is like your tripwire. It's like your lead magnet, right? So it's a really good value. It's cheap. And because the bottom line is, like, if someone spends anything with you, $2, $1, $8, they're 8 times more likely to spend a second time than someone who's never interacted with you at the beginning. So they call it a tripwire. So to have some sort of a tripwire where you've got a really good, pretty good value, you might be selling it at a loss potentially, but it gets them in the funnel. And now you've got other things on the back end where you can get you get more money from that same customer on average. I mean, not every single one, but on average, you're going to get more money. What does that allow you to do? It allows you to spend more for the initial interaction and still be break even or profitable, which means you can kill your competition. Like if your competition can spend $55 on a new customer, but you can spend $85 on a new customer and still be break even or profitable, you're going to rule the table, right? So it's always a question of like, how much value can you get out of a customer? And in many times, if you're coming into the space with just one product or one service to sell, stop. Don't start there. Make sure you have at least three, right? 3 products where you've got a menu. You've got like, okay, and always pick something more expensive. You know, like the most expensive, Jim, this is crazy. The most expensive iPhone that you can, or the Apple phone that you can buy is $114,000. And it's like encrusted with diamonds and all this crazy stuff. Always have a more expensive product. Like in the 90s, I studied marketing and finance when I went to university. And there was a very famous case history from the 90s. It's in most marketing textbooks. And it talked about the grocery stores that had wine up until the 90s generally had wine in the $10 range and the $25 range. Okay. In the mid-90s, early to mid-90s, they started carrying the $45 bottles. Nobody buys the $45 bottles, but it dramatically increases the sale of the $25 bottles. Okay, so you get a more expensive product, not to sell it, but to have it available because it's going to increase the sales of the ones lower down on the menu. So, have a menu of products, 3, 4, 5 products in a sliding scale from very cheap to very expensive. Then you go in, right, and start calculating that lifetime value, follow the data, make sure you maximize your conversion rate. And then you start to see, okay, I can spend $80, $200, $1,000 for a new customer, depending on what it is you're selling. And then you can make decisions that other people don't even have access to.
Oh, so Patrick, I tell you, you're massive information. So his new book is Pandemic Inc., which was written after the Anarchy Inc., and both of them are well worth your read. So Patrick, I've enjoyed my time as usual. So how do the B2B DM gang get in touch with you?
My website is I'm a speaker, so my website is geared towards that. But it's a great way to get a hold of me. If anyone has questions or they want to connect somehow, the emails that get sent through the contact form of my website, they literally come into my own email box, and I still can get to most of them. Sometimes I offload a couple if it gets heavy, but for the most part, I reply to all the messages. So if anyone wants to get a hold of me, it's patrickschwerdtfeger.com. I know that's a disaster, but it will get to me. You can even go to bookpatrick.com, which is a shorter version, which should forward. But sometimes that's glitchy. But yeah, my full name.com. If anyone's interested, I'd love to connect.
Patrick Schwerdtfeger, thanks for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thanks so much, Jim. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.